all right, everyone. This is Aman here again from Epiq 360, beaming live from my home studio in Dubai and connecting with someone right across the world in Toronto, Nathalie Niddam. We had someone in Dubai for our first show. We had someone in Melbourne for our second one, and now we have Toronto. So we're kind of doing this world tour, and super delighted to have Nathalie with us in a morning time. So again, we are not kind of intervening in her personal life otherwise. Welcome, Nathalie. Good to see you.
Thank you so much for having me. It's nice to see you too. Nice to meet you in person, finally.
So Nathalie, I've been a secret fan / follower of Nathalie. She's been doing wonderful things in terms of educating everyone who's interested about peptides, biohacking, becoming superhuman. She's got this amazing Facebook group. So I've been kind of tracking that. So when I launched Epiq Thursday, I said she definitely has to be on the show when we get on. And very, I guess honored that she said, yes, let's do it. So we're going to be touching a bunch of things which relate to the art and science of extending your health span and not just lifespan. And, Nathalie has got some principles that she talks about, her basic pillars, the foundations. We'll cover those. We'll go into how do you then start climbing those pillars, those ladder elements. And then finally, for those of us who want to geek out and go into that turbo mode, she's got some, I guess, things for us, some protocols, some practices we can try. She was telling me something even before we got on the call as well, which was interesting. But if you're like watching now, please say hi. Tell us where you're sort of signing in from. If you have any questions, drop them in the comments as well. But so Nathalie, just a quick way of introduction. She graduated with honors from the Institute of, I think, Holistic Nutrition. She's also a certified coach with Bulletproof out of the first batch, and she's also an epigenetic coach with Epiq. So she's the coach of coaches. I've heard a lot about how she's been kind of teaching people the best from all sides of the fence. So let's start, Nathalie, with I guess the whole idea of what do you see to be the fundamental principles of health span?
I think that the most important thing and the thing that I tackle first with my clients whenever I'm talking to someone is moving into this idea of personalizing whatever you do to your own biology. And I think that one of the big issues out there right now is there's a lot of confusion. There's a lot of conflicting messaging that people get from various places. And, at the end of the day, it's not whether someone is right or wrong. It's really about, is it right for you or is it not right for you? So, and this comes down to whether we're talking about your nutrition, your supplementation, the strategies that you use to optimize your sleep, even the strategies that you use to build stress resilience into your system and into your mindset. Not everything works for everybody. Like for example, like one of the things that seems most obvious is gratitude practice. Everybody talks about, you need to have a gratitude practice. You need to meditate. You need to be mindful. And gratitude practice actually works differently for different people. Mm-hmm. And there was actually a study that came out quite a while ago, and I learned about it when I was doing my Bulletproof coach training, that showed that for some people, imposing on them the need to do this writing out of gratitude practice every single morning actually was counterproductive for them. For them, they benefit more from doing it maybe every other day. So it's just how personalized everything needs to be so that you lay that foundation from which you can move onwards.
So as people think about personalizing, because clearly the Panadol is for everyone, and the vitamin C is for everyone, and et cetera, as you kind of hear, right? So I'm kind of maybe tongue-in-cheek remark there, because I don't like to take Panadol, and the same thing as well, trying to find something that is natural. So I think you're also a believer that we should be not just depending on these, I guess, pharmacy-based medicines, or I guess elements that kind of sometimes weaken our body to fight, right? And kind of really build those foundations. So maybe it would be useful to see what you've seen in the work that you've done with clients and the work that you've done for your coaching certifications. What has seemed to be the critical, I guess, base points of ensuring that you don't need to be having those dependencies on these sort of external elements?
Mm-hmm. So supplement by definition is in addition to, right? It's supplemental. Mm-hmm. So I think that supplements definitely have a place, but you need to know, what do you need right now versus what is everybody saying? Even vitamin C, honestly, people will say everybody needs to be taking vitamin C. Nah, not so much. Look at your diet, look at your lifestyle, make sure that you're eating foods, and it doesn't matter really, the whole issue around supplementation, it's a little bit, it's so gray, right? Like even the way that RDAs were set up, or what are the dosages that you need. There's a time and a place for different supplements. I would say that in my practice, I encourage people to keep a very close eye on their vitamin D levels. And that's one that more often than not, I will have my clients, and frankly, even myself, supplement with vitamin D3, always with vitamin K2. And this is where, in supplementation even, this is where your epigenetic, your genomic setup, that blueprint of your genetic setup comes into play. It turns out that someone like me from a Mediterranean background, I've come from, my ancestry, if you will, evolved in a very sun-filled environment. I'm now living in Canada, in Toronto, anything but sun, but my sun means I'm really at taking a little bit of sunshine and converting it into the vitamin D3 that I need. So for someone like me, it's super important to keep an eye on these things. So I think that before you supplement, know why you're supplementing, make sure you need it, and then make sure that your source is great, and make sure that the dosage is right. You know, like all of these things. I very often I'll meet with clients and we'll talk about supplements, and they'll show me, they'll open a cupboard and it'll be filled with bottles upon bottles upon bottles of things that they read about, they heard about. Oh, this is the thing, you need to have this, you need to have that. Not necessarily. It depends. So you just have to be very careful with supplements.
So you talked about epigenetics there, and I think maybe it'd be useful to kind of give the primer, the epigenetics 101 to someone who's watching this and trying to understand what does that really mean. So in your sort of definition of how does one understand what this whole piece of, I guess, part of our body is, you know, not just the environment inside, but the outside, the environment as well. And how do they then take that information to do something with it?
Great question. So essentially, when you run a genomic panel, like you run your genetics, you are getting insight into your hardware, right? How is my body set up to, and we can look at everything from how you manage your macronutrients to how efficient you are at processing or absorbing different vitamins and minerals. We can look at your efficiencies for detoxification if you tend towards one pathway or another when it comes to hormones, toxins, drugs, whatever the case may be. So that's your genetic. Those are your genes. That doesn't really change. Having said that, whether those genes get flipped on or off has everything to do with the epigenome. So it has to do with the environment that you live in, both the environment you can control and the environment you can't control. So the environment you can't control, obviously, the toxins that you might be exposed to in your environment, but the ones that you can control, everything from the foods that you eat, the supplements you take, your lifestyle, whether you sleep or you don't sleep, your exercise, and wait, there was another one I was just thinking about a minute ago, like your stress levels, right? How you manage your stress. We're all stress, especially these days. Inevitable, to be honest, you could not live without stress. It's actually one of the drivers that keeps us moving as human beings. But how you handle that stress and your tools and strategies for managing that stress affect how the stress affects you and your genes. So genes get flipped on and off. What you do, what you eat, how you live influences that. Does that answer your question?
It does, and in fact, it reminds me of a story where, you know, some people who probably are not familiar with this notion of epigenetics feel that they are stuck with what they've been served. So they may say, you know what, in my family, I've seen a history of heart disease, and people usually die at this age. And I literally kind of heard a story of someone who said, you know what, I've got on average 2 years left because by that time I'm going to get my first heart attack, or whatever the story is, right? So they kind of are, in a sense, so therefore it's kind of messing up their mind as well. Their body is already getting weakened by that sort of negative resolve. But at the same time, to your point, you know, they're not appreciating what they can do consciously to change that. And, you know, do what they can to go on the other side of the fence, not just wait for something to be served to them, but kind of go out and pick their own life in that sense.
That's such a great point. As a matter of fact, one of the things that we look at in the panel that I use is your Apoe status. So Apoe is actually a protein that carries fat in the blood. I mean, oversimplification times 1,000, let's just be clear. Having said that, your Apoe status, whether you're an Apoe2, an Apoe3, or an Apoe4, has a significant impact on your propensity. And in genomics, we only talk about propensities. There's no absolutes, right? When we look at someone's genetics, we see that there's a propensity for, to your point, developing heart disease, developing type 2 diabetes, all that kind of stuff. But you can influence that. And so let's say ApoE4s have a much higher risk of developing cognitive decline in older age and cardiovascular disease. But here's the cool thing. The cool thing is that if these people change and adapt a better diet and exercise routine, they can actually reduce their risk to the exact same level as anybody else's. ApoE4 actually evolved to protect people. People who are ApoE4s have a higher resistance to viruses, for example, which people really don't appreciate. So there's, Mother Nature doesn't really screw up much. She just gives us a certain deck of cards, and it's up to us to figure out those cards and how to play them, to use them to our advantage.
Well, there's a company that the name kind of misses me right now. It's one of the largest untold successes yet, because they've not gone public. There's like a $10 billion company that is doing things around hair loss, joints, etc. They're based out of I think they're based in the West Coast, as far as I remember. And dramatic work. Again, they're looking at genes, working with CRISPR and everything else as well to an extent, and trying to see what they can to alter things that people have taken for granted. Like, okay, there's nothing to deal with, male pattern baldness, for example. So how do you kind of work around that and see what can be done? So this is where these new ideas of, epigenetics can make a big difference. So also, Natalie, something that I've learned a lot from you, and I'd love for you to kind of educate the audience here, is the whole idea of peptides, right? Which is like the next level when it comes to upgrading your performance. I mean, my experience with peptides has been using BPC-157 and TB5000 to help me deal with a faster recovery from a fracture injury I had a few months ago. But if, again, you were to kind of get someone started on peptides, what are peptides? What do they help with? And are there any risks with that, et cetera, et cetera? Like, the umbrella helicopter view on this.
Okay, so peptides are fascinating, and there's definitely a lot of people in many areas of healthcare, from conventional doctors to alternative practitioners, who really truly believe that this is our next evolution it's going to. And what peptides are little proteins filled with protein. Proteins are essentially chains of amino acids. A peptide, by definition, usually is about 50 amino acids or less long. And so peptides are, I think at their best, they're signaling molecules in the body. And why people are so fascinated by them is because, unlike a drug that comes in and tries to do something from the top, a peptide will signal the body, will upregulate the body's ability to do what it does best. So to your point, the BPC-157 and the TB500, probably what they're doing is they're upregulating your body's ability to repair and restore function, to reduce inflammation, to do all that stuff. So there are 7,000 peptides that we know of. They are all naturally occurring to the body. What's happening in this new peptide world is that they're now being made synthetically outside of the body, and they're being made like little fractions that are known to trigger certain responses in the body. What the other thing that's very cool, kind of cool and not cool about peptides, is they're very pleiotropic. So that what that means is a peptide doesn't just do one thing. It will often do many different things in the body. And so the more we learn, the better we understand them, the more we're able to predict what's going to happen when you use a certain peptide. So the upsides of peptides is that they're very short acting. They're very short-lived in the body. The downside right now is that many peptides that are being marketed and out there, and they're not really being marketed in the mainstream for the most part, they're not 100% well understood. Some of them are very well studied. The BPC-157 is very well studied. The thymosin beta-4, which is probably what you use, there's a bit of confusion between TB500, thymosin beta-4. That's for another day. Those are quite well studied. There's another one called GHK-Cu, which is best known as a skin rejuvenating peptide, but that peptide actually, when we go back to genetics, it flips about 1,000 genes on and off in a good way. So it's amazing, the range of effects. They're very short-lived, but you have to be careful with them because there's many of them that are very promising, but you know, there's no free lunch in biology. So you have to be mindful of where you're getting your information from, where you're getting your peptides from, and how well understood a peptide is before you're going to kind of dive headlong, just because there was a study on mice that said, oh, this peptide made the mouse's hair grow back magically. And it's like, cool, but here's the news, like, we're not mice.
Well, I mean, yeah, and as you say, you know, like it's, I think the idea of also self-injecting is something that I had to get over, because I mean, that's the whole idea. It's not, I guess, having the shelf life and even the sort of life cycle kind of last longer in your body. So you can't take it or ingest it normally, right? You got to sort of do the sub-Q or otherwise. And that's kind of, for some people that I was speaking to someone the other day, I said, look, if you want to heal your injury, you can try it. They're like, no, I'm not going to self-inject myself, for example, right? So
yeah, no, it's not everybody's cup of tea. So to be clear, the injection is just subcutaneous. So it's like a diabetic giving themselves insulin, which by the way is peptide. But the cool thing about injury is your friend could consider BPC-157, which is one of the few peptides that can be taken orally because it is naturally present in gastric juice. Most peptides, to your point, you try to take it orally, you'll just digest it. It's a protein. Your body will just break it down. But the BPC-157 can be used orally. But I would say one of the biggest things in peptide research right now, aside from figuring out what the next big peptide is and what it does, is can we figure out a way to make them available either orally or transdermally, or some of them can be used intranasally very efficiently. But at the end of the day, it has to do with the size of the molecule and how well absorbed it is in the body.
So I want to maybe do a few things before we finish off. One is you spoke of an interesting patch that you could apply to the neck and it can do magical wonders. Tell us all about this.
So this comes out of the world of biohacking, right? So when I'm working with my clients, I start with the foundations. We get them from wherever they are. Usually they come to me because there's some kind of imbalance going on, whether it's sleep, digestion, energy, whatever it is. We get them to that kind of happy place where they're now balanced and feeling good. And now we're looking at ways to upgrade. How do we get you to the next level so you're not just feeling good every morning, but you're feeling amazing and you're, you know, carrying it through the day. So this little patch, it's brand new. It's just come out of Silicon Valley by a company called Think, which is THYNC. It's called a Zing. And first of all, it looks super cool. I have it in my bedroom. Unfortunately, I didn't think to bring it with me. But it looks like a patch made out of fabric with a little lightning bolt on it. And you stick it on the muscle right under your ear, right here. And you stick it there, leave it for 5 minutes. And what you will feel is like, if you've ever had pulsed electromagnetic kind of therapy, you're going to feel this pulse of electricity that's delivered from this little patch that's not plugged into anything. It has its own little power source. And it's a very specific program of pulses. And what it's accessing here is the greater auricular nerve. And that nerve runs into the brain and it activates your energy centers. And it will basically deliver you, on average, about 4 hours of very steady energy. So it's a complete hack around needing caffeine, stimulants, any of that kind of stuff. But the cool thing is that if, let's say, after 2.5 or 3 hours, you need to go to sleep because you used it to plow through a late night study session or work session or a drive, like my husband, you can go to sleep. So there's not an excitatory effect to it. There's just this, I don't know, it's hard to explain. I've used it a few times myself. It's just this kind of Zen ride. So that's
I'm ordering it as soon as it's being ordered tonight.
So just so people know, right now, they don't have very many, but they've got a limited number of samples that they're willing to give people for free just to try it. So I don't know if you're going to give the link to my Facebook group at the end of this. If people come to the Facebook group, there's a post right now pinned to the top with the website. The only problem is they ship to Canada and the US at this time. So you need to have a US address or a US friend who will order it for you and then send it off to you if you happen to be international.
We'll find a way. We'll find a way. Don't worry about that.
Well, you're a hacker.
I'm a hacker. I'm going to find
way.
a way around that. My son thinks hacking is a bad sport, but I try to tell him it's like, if you do it with good intent, anything or something could be bad intent as well. So finishing off, a couple of things. So if you were to, as your parting thoughts on this, 3 things that perhaps people should be always mindful of when they look at the whole idea of extending their health span, what would be the 3 most, or never forget these kind of essentials ever?
Gosh, that's like picking my favorite child. It's a very hard thing for me to do.
Okay, we can top 5 if you want.
Okay. So first of all, I do believe that understanding your genetic makeup is really important because it's going to give you guidance as to what are your superpowers and what are the things you need to shore up on. So I believe that getting that genetic panel done and having that understanding and going to a company that I believe that the direct-to-consumer companies are not doing people a good service. So find a coach, find someone who's got a good panel, and there's a few out there, not just the one I use, and get a basic understanding of your own setup. Prioritize sleep above all. If we don't sleep, we can't regenerate, we can't recover. And it's not always about how many hours you spend in bed, it's about how efficiently you're sleeping. I see that you're wearing an Oura ring. You have a really good idea of that. If you can get what you need in 6 hours, I think the whole 8 to 9 hours of sleep a night is a myth. I really do. Mm-hmm. I think mindset's really important. I think having whatever kind of meditation, gratitude, mindfulness practice that resonates for you is really crucial to putting yourself in a headspace and a mind space where you're able to enjoy the joy, weather the storms, and get yourself into that place where you're flexible, right? You can go with the flow. That was 3.
Well, I'm going to ask you to do the 4th one on my request because I remember you spoke of this earlier, the so-called ABC strategy. What's the ABC strategy?
Ooh, easy. So the ABC strategy is a strategy that I teach my clients that I learned myself in one of my coaching programs. And it's when you come up against a situation that is difficult, whether it's in your personal life, whether you're trying to make better food choices or at work. So acknowledge that you're in a difficult situation. You have a choice to make, whatever the case may be. B is breathe, take a breath, give yourself a second of distance before you react. And C is choose, make a choice based on the outcome that you desire. Make your choice and then be good with it. Whatever that is.
Simple as that. That's ABC, right? That's what they teach in kindergarten. So closing off, what would be, if you were to set a challenge for those who watch this video either live now or later, something that would really help them optimize and upgrade the life in the way that you kind of teach your clients, what would be something you would set them either as a 7-day or as a 30-day challenge? I'll let you decide what you feel is the best way to get them started.
Well, I would always pick a 30-day because 7 days great if you're a total newbie, but I think 30 days, if you can commit to yourself for 30 days, and let's take sleep, for example. Let's say that for 30 days, you're going to make a commitment to improve your sleep by adopting a good sleep hygiene routine. So that would mean that in the hour before bed, you'd shut off your screens, you'd wear blue blockers to block out the artificial light, you'd make sure that your room is cool and dark. You would turn off as many electrical devices as you can in your house, ideally Wi-Fi. You would wake up early in the morning, see first light as best as you can from outside, watch the sunset, make that commitment to yourself to prioritize sleep for 30 days. See how you feel coming out of it, and then go from there.
Well, we'll see how people do. I mean, I have to work on that myself. So I guess, like I said, charity begins at home as well. So in this case, I have to kind of start thinking of how we can improve that. But again, Natalie, thank you very much. We'll drop the links on the Facebook group and your podcast as well in the in the comments in the Facebook group. And again, thank you very much. I know that you have a busy day ahead, not only like with your clients and otherwise with the group that you navigate, but really a pleasure having you on the show, and look forward to having you later when we are doing longer shows as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much. This was such a pleasure. This was great. Thanks again.